Now, hello everyone, and I hope you connected successfully. If there are any problem, please let us know. You can see the expo sign before the administrator. My name is Ian, along with Carla. Hello, Camila. And I'm representing the expo KI the student chapter. And today we have gladly invite Anna, who is currently the senior entrepreneur and the CEO at MedUniverse. Anna will talk to us about the economic aspect of digital health and her journey with MedUniverse. And welcome, Anna. Thank you for joining us. And this talk will last for approximately 35 minutes, and we will have time for question and at the end. And if you have any question during the talk, please put the question in the chat, and we will make sure they are answered. And now I leave to Anna. Welcome, Anna.
Thank you, Ian. Really good to be here. And it's Monday, and it's always good to get a fresh start on things, and particularly when you get to meet students. It's very exciting. I was just briefly introduced to eSport, and it sounds like such an exciting program. I wish I was younger and I could take all the courses again. It sounds really, really, really fun. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what's been happening over the last couple of years, obviously within the digital atmosphere and the digital ecosystem, and see where MedUniverse fits in that, the company that I run today. So, and as Ian said, I will leave room at the end for questions. I'm really hoping that we can get a dialogue going with you. Looking forward to that. Just a brief intro to myself, who is talking. So I'm the CEO and co-founder of MedUniverse today, and I will soon give you much more information about what we do. And prior to that, I started and led up a company called Tasteline, which is food and recipes online, currently owned by the Swedish delivery company called Mathem, which delivers groceries home to people. And then I also started a network for entrepreneurs called Pokerface. We are 100 women who have started at least one company each, and we play poker together, which I could give you an entire lesson on, different to this one. I'm on a couple of boards. Praktiker Tjänst is one, Hemfrid is another, and the Heart Lung Foundation is a third. So I like the board scenario because it gives me great input from the bigger scenario companies to my smaller startup initiatives, and it's very inspirational to get both these areas. I think that's what's inspiring about this talk as well. To get access to students is always something that will jog your mind, and I hope for a good communication and good questions that come out of this one. So very briefly, what I will cover in the next, say, half an hour is a little bit my view on the digital landscape and how much has happened over the last decade, really. And my point of view here is that the health side of things have really taken a long time. If you compare it with, for instance, banking or traveling or food, for that instance, for that matter. And then I'll give you a background on MedUniverse, the opportunity that we saw in this entire ecosystem, and what we wanted to make out of it, and the information gap that we've really pushed into out of a health economics perspective, getting right information to the doctors when prescribing drugs so that the patients get the right treatments, basically. And then I'll share a couple of anecdotes from what it's like to be an entrepreneur. Many of you are probably interested in that. And feel free to ask me questions around starting a company as well, if you feel like that's your interest in being here. All right, and then we'll leave room, as I said, for questions and answers at the end. So a little bit about the digital landscape. Obviously, a lot has happened, and I was looking for logos, putting this slide together, and there's just so many players in this field right now. And it's difficult to be a part of this community. I mean, obviously, with so much going on, everything from providers, digital health startups, investors, the government, it's all a very regulated area. So all the initiatives that are happening are sort of in silos, but they really need to collaborate with each other. So I think when I heard about this seminar, I was really interested in hearing more also what your focus on in health economics is within the digital sphere. What do you really focus on? For our interest, it was really interesting. When you start a company, it's really about identifying a problem, right? So where do we see that the biggest problem is within this space? And a lot of these different parts of the ecosystem are important to us. The problem that we found quite early on within MedUniverse was that the communication between the pharmaceutical industry on one side and the doctors on one side was a little bit difficult. It was a difficult dialogue to have. And one thing we found prior to that was actually that even between doctors, there's a big potential in collaborating. So when it comes to MedUniverse, today we're the patient case engagement platform, and I will show you a little more of that. But where we actually started was a network for doctors. So the first problem that we looked at within the space of all these different actors in the healthcare section was that when you look at doctors, and this really came out of Tasteline, which I'd started prior to MedUniverse, where we saw that there was a big food community. People started to share recipes and really getting interactive around, what are you cooking? I like to cook this way. So there was a big community that came out of that. And then we thought, okay, well, what other group of people could benefit from having a close-knit network to discuss things that they want to ask more genuinely on a topic like health, for instance. So we started MedUniverse first as a doctors network. We saw several examples of that in both the States and in the UK. And we thought, okay, well, there's a need for maybe a Swedish network of doctors. Once having done that for, I'd say 3, 4, 5 years, we found that the one thing that really was triggering the doctors the most was in fact patient cases. Because when there was a patient case online, something happened. Something happened that was triggering the doctors to participate, asking us questions like, am I being graded? Can I see how others answer these questions? It was something that really got their interest. So we did a pivot 6 years ago in the company and said, okay, well, let's leave the network, because the network in itself wasn't good enough. With LinkedIn and Facebook functionality out there, it was always difficult to make this a good enough network functionality to really work for the target group. But the one thing we did find was patient cases was different. So then we started looking at that entirely. So we changed both our business, but also our business model. And our first business model was basically based on advertising. So how did we make money off of the network? We sold advertising space around it. We changed all that and made it a software as a service model, which basically meant that we sold a license to the pharmaceutical industry, where they can pay for 12 months and to build patient cases that inform about their patient cases, or their drugs rather. So this is the opportunity we saw, and this is really what I think a lot of entrepreneurship is about. First of all, identifying the problem, and then is there, in my world, also health economics involved that are beneficial for this, i.e., are we making a real difference in the opportunity that we're seeing? I think that's where we found our biggest interest in this. So the opportunity that we found was that pharmaceuticals really rely on getting accurate information about their drugs to the right doctors so that they can then prescribe the right drugs to the right patients. And what we've seen over these years is it's increasingly difficult for the pharmaceutical industry to actually get these relationships with the doctors. And during Corona, this has sped up immensely, because the pharmaceutical industry is like everyone else. And as we're doing, everything is online right now. So access points are very difficult to get, especially going to the hospitals. Obviously, everyone is restricted to a completely different set of rules today. And this ultimately affects the patient outcomes negatively, because if the information isn't passed along correctly, the doctors won't get the right information, and then ultimately the patients will not get the right treatments. So this is where we've focused, and this is where we've seen that there is a need for new updated formats and solutions to engage the doctors. And what we've focused on is this, what we call the knowledge gap between the pharmaceutical industry and the doctors. Super busy doctors, super busy pharma, but there's a lot of information there that needs to be shared. And what we also found is that healthcare professionals, here shortened HCPs, are often also using patient case content, and they want the information to be sent that way. But only pharma is only 20% of pharma companies are using this as a patient case, as a format to explain their products. So this is where we saw a big opportunity. And the value to pharma is obviously that we know that patient cases engages the doctor. It's relevant to them. It's something that is a much more transparent discussion. It's about the relevant person in the room, that is the patient. So that is what triggers the doctor to participate, but it's also what gives the most information to the pharmaceutical company. And this is a possibility for the pharmaceutical industry to identify knowledge gaps around their drugs. What is it that is not clear? And it allows for much more patient-centric decision-making and measurable behavioral change. And MedUniverse's role in this, what are we? Are we experts? Are we doctors? No, we are experts on digital platforms. So we have made a big effort into providing the best platform to get your message across if you're working within pharma. So if pharma spent lots of years in researching on a specific drug, they are ready for launch. This is where they can do this in a very easy format. And so what can it actually look like then? So this is a patient case example, and we can do this in different modules. And I was actually a little bit interested to see if we can actually see if you want to try this. Our platform allows for somewhere where you can create the patient case, and then they distribute it in different channels on their websites, in emails, in text messages, wherever they feel that they want to reach the target group. You could, for instance, all be a target group. And then you get the interaction going and you can see what actually came out of it. So if you're up for it, and if you have your cell phones ready, we'll see if some of you can actually participate in this patient case. And we will look at Margit, who was actually the demo case in the presentation as well. Can you still see my case, or my screen? And you can see the QR code perhaps. Now, if you direct your camera in your phones towards this, I can see that some are already picking up on this, and we've got 3 people involved. We'll see how many we can get involved, and then we'll dig into the patient case, because this is what it can look like. And I'd like you all to think about, is this something that we could use where we're at in our teaching, in our learnings? Some course that maybe could actually use this efficiently, whether it's a patient case or not. It could be something that has with health economics to do. Obviously, working with the pharmaceutical industry, we often work with a lot of disclaimer text, but we will dig right into the case. So here's Margit. She's turned up at the emergency department. She's 70 years old. She smokes a packet of cigarettes every day and takes tablets for her hypertension. She has no other illnesses. And she states that she suddenly experienced a high fever that very morning and started coughing and difficulty breathing. She has also mentioned that she has a stitch on her right side. Reading this, I think we need to update this with Corona information, but I can give it away now. This is not Corona. You can also tell who has created the case, and you can also see who's reviewed the case. Now, with her in the department, in the emergency department, we get a little bit more information about her blood pressure and her temperature. She's tired and worn out, but completely oriented. We can get some more information here. This is just a test. This is just a demo, so you can see that this should turn up in your iPhones or your tablets or whatever you're using, and we can have video material here as well. But digging into this, I would now like to give you the opportunity to say what you think the agent is, which agent is the most likely cause of her symptoms. And as you can see, there's a timer here, so you can feel totally stressed out. But I will wait for as many people as possible to answer. I can also follow how many of you are replying, so I can see that there's good action here. And with time up, we've got 9 out of 11, 10 out of 11. Can we get the last one? Dun, 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 dun. Ooh, all of a sudden we're 12, and now we've got 11. It's all very exciting. We will move on, and we can see that most of you got this right. So I can tell you are all at Karolinska, which is great. And then the discussion is also, obviously, that's something we can talk about. Okay, why are we doing this incorrect? And back to health economics. Is this something that we need to inform upon? How can we update the material so that it makes more sense and that they get the right answer? And this is something that is currently being used a lot today. All right, so then you can continue, you can get more feedback on this, we can discuss this in the room. And if I were a doctor, I would give you a much deeper insight. Lucky thing, I've only got 30 minutes and I can move on. But obviously, this is something that you get a lot of discussion off of. And then you can have more questions like this. I will leave this case now, but you get the point of what it looks like. So we will move back to the presentation. I'm just checking in. Can you see the presentation again? And I've left the patient case. Okay, great. If anyone wants the entire patient case, it's on meduniverse.com, so you can always go in and see what the replies are and what the right answers are afterwards. And we've got these two different modules, the moderated one and the individual one. And the individual one is the one that's on the website that you can have a look at later if you want. All right. So basically what comes out of this then is, in fact, the actual data. And I think anyone who's doing these type of things, I mean, if you're doing polls or if you're doing anything online that measures the interactivity of things, the point is to actually see what the outcomes are. Back to what you guys are always focused on in your studies as well. What are the real outcomes and where do we need more updating? So this is really the opportunity to find out, okay, well, what people are not getting this right and what are they saying instead? What should we focus on in our messaging and updating this material? We can also tell where they've been, were they using their tablets or were they online? Right here, sorry, the desktop or mobile, other, or what activity was this used in? Was it on the web pages or was it in our newsletter that we got this interaction? And we can measure the actual effectiveness of our media platforms that we're using. So where are we at today? Well, today MedUniverse is working with 15 global pharmaceutical companies. We're supporting 29 languages, and I think that's another aspect that's really interesting. We can compare data on a global level to see how are different drugs being perceived in different countries, and what are the different knowledge gaps in different countries that we can learn from. It could be that an initiative may start in Europe somewhere and then that knowledge can be transferred to the US. This is something that's always being updated. So an iterative sort of relationship to patient cases where you can update the material constantly. We are based in Stockholm and we have a very entrepreneurial team, I'd say, and also a very global team. We've got people from Mexico, we've got people from Spain, the UK, and South Africa. We're really trying to stay an international team. When you're a small team with 10 people, you can be bigger when you have different competencies from the world. So that's really exciting. So just to follow up on, this all makes it sound really easy. It's so easy to start a company, or, you know, where did we start this? But I gave you the first picture of who is talking, and I'd like to complement that by this alternative self-portrait. I'm not sure if you all know this GB Glassgubben, as we say in Swedish. It's basically the ice cream parlor guy outside when you buy ice creams. Why I love this portrait, because it really, for me, symbolizes what entrepreneurship is all about. There's this smiling person, and once it gets hit, it could fall down. But usually it stands right back up again. And that's really what entrepreneurship is a lot about. Taking some tough hits. It's usually really difficult to start these companies in this space, but there's a lot of opportunity behind it, especially if you find the right team players. So you need your supporters there to help you. And some of the learnings behind MedUniverse was obviously the first part, where we started a company in a space where it was very early days. So in We started the company in 2008, and I'd say that's not very early if you look at the entire digital landscape, which had come quite far. Like I mentioned earlier, banking had come very far. We had lots of people working within traveling, for instance. There's lots of digital services that everyone is using. But within healthcare, there had really been quite a slow adaptation to the entire digital space. So I think that learning was that we were very much too early. We figured that after 10 years in the food industry, the pharma industry would have come just as far. But in fact, many of the companies that we met with just last year when Corona hit started to move online because there was an absolute need. All other options were taken away. And that is something that you need to analyze before moving into entrepreneurship. You need to find the problem, but you also need to see that everyone else is perceiving that problem in the same sort of acute way and are looking for actively for a solution. So just before we go into a little bit of your questions perhaps and moving into what are the learnings that I have from using to starting up companies, basically, is really make sure that you dare to try, absolutely, and question the well-established truths out there. And I think if I was taking a course in health economics right now, I would really like to analyze this picture that I showed in the beginning of all the different players out there. Where are the major problems among them today? And I promise you that you'll find lots of them in between the cracks where there is where there's little functioning communication. So a deep dig into that and see where are the biggest possibilities in that. I mean, as you've seen over the last couple of years, extremely clearly, is obviously that there's been a lot of emphasis on the new digital platforms for remote doctor meetings, for instance, or also remote patient apps that you can use. And within this, how do you connect all of these different apps to work together and work to the benefit of the patient, but also to the benefit of the entire system, so you get more data out of it? And on a more personal note, I think one of the things that I've found in many of my lectures is that most people, and especially at maybe a younger level, think, well, I could never start a company because I'm all by myself. Nobody would believe in this. But you don't really have to do everything on your own. I think the best way of finding your team members are really in the room you're in, and especially when you see, okay, how do I collaborate with different people and who makes me a better person? So really trying to identify early on, and especially when you're studying, who do I work really well with and what can I do together with them? The fourth bullet point is something that I think is something that I usually point out in these type of settings, because sales is important. And sales is something that might be perceived as something terrible. And, oh, I can't believe they're calling me again trying to sell these things. But if you turn it around, sales is really what is important in every aspect of life. You need to, if you're applying for a new course, or if you're writing a report on something, you need to prove to the people that you're going to present to this report to that it's worth reading, right? So that's also some sort of sales in that. And in all the companies that I've been on, this has really been so important, getting your product out there and really trying it before seeing that the companies that are going to buy it really like the product and see the value of it. Really getting that in place early is important. Writing the letter to yourself, what's that all about? Another aspect before you jump into this sort of entrepreneurship level, I think it's important that you really say, okay, well, why am I doing this? I've got so many different options out there. I could take a job here, I could do this, but this is an opportunity for you to say, okay, I'm starting a company and I'm writing the letter to myself. Why am I doing this? Because I want to learn how to. And it might be that you have signed a contract that I'm owning 5% of this business because I needed the money for it and I have an investment. Whatever it is, it's important that when you do something, you can sort of make a mental note and say, this is why I'm doing it. And then always measure, analyze, and follow up. Change, develop, innovate. This is what entrepreneurship is a lot about, obviously. And bullet point number 8, it takes a long time. So stamina is important. I think people have asked me 1,000 times during my MedUniverse years, didn't you start this 12 years ago? Yeah, but we pivoted. We did a pivot in the company. So now it's a completely different company. And people will ask, well, how can you push through this? But it's really about keep on trying, keep on trying, keep on. We're still really getting the recipe right. And it's all about adding the right ingredients at the right time, right? So it's a lot like cooking in that sense, but it takes a lot longer time than cooking your meal. And share your experiences is my experience and when you share, you often get a lot of new ideas with other people who can contribute to your idea. Last but not least, you need a little pinch of luck and timing in there as well. It always makes things a little bit easier. But I'm very excited to be in this field, and it's given me a lot. I hope that we can move from here to a little bit more in-depth questions of what you might be wondering, whether it's regarding entrepreneurship or MedUniverse per se, or the digital landscape. But I'm happy to fill you in on any questions you may have. So please feel free to join in on the conversation.
Thanks for insight for sharing, Anna. And I have received some questions privately, but here is a question in the chat. We can go for this first. Malsa asked about how do you create a different unique selling point in comparison to bigger companies like Medscape? Also, how do you gather the right user segment to share the case to?
Yeah, so the first question, USP, unique selling points in comparison to, say, Medscape, for instance. So this is, this is really important, that we are a technical platform. We do not provide the content. So we're really trying to stick out as the preferred partner when it comes to actual content creation, that we make it really simple to add a patient case. There's a key opinion leader collaboration module, we call it, where you can integrate or interact with doctors who can then put in the content. So that's supposed to be made as simple as possible. And also in how you distribute your content, we use encrypted links. So whenever you have a patient case, you can then just stick it anywhere and then gather data off of that. So I'd say that makes this completely different to somebody like Medscape. The other question, I'm afraid you're going to have to repeat it, Ian.
How do you gather the right user segments to share the case to?
Yes, so that's another good question. I think when it comes to the pharmaceutical industry, they often know exactly who they want to target with their messaging, so that they know that if it's an oncology product, breast cancer, for instance, they know that they need to look for oncologists, and they often have access points. So it's within their existing marketing channels, and we do not deliver on that. That is somewhere where you could complement our technical platform with an existing doctors network, for instance. We're not using the MedUniverse network anymore, but other companies are. So there are lots of different companies out there. M3 is one big delivery of actual content or provider of database of doctors, and they can use our links. So that could be a collaboration, but it could also be used for educational purposes. So for instance, it could be that Karolinska would use an account to really use it out of a teaching perspective. So it's a little bit different who uses the platform, but it's up to the people who are using the platform to choose where they want to, what target group, and put that target group together. Hope that answers the question.
Okay, next question is about how do you monitor the impact of your platform, and how do you measure the value for pharmaceutical and for doctors?
Yeah, wow, these are very Interesting question. So the dashboard functionality in the platform is really where we evaluate it. Okay, so for the first question, I'd say, what's the value for pharma? How do we actually evaluate that? Well, that comes back straight away from the pharma companies. If they can see that they're getting much more engaged meetings, they get more meetings, that they can actually change behavior because how they can update their messages, that is when it becomes an important platform for them. That's when we are generating value. If we were only to be a digital fun tool, like many of the polling tools out there will give you a fun meeting, like the one we did now, we just briefly went through a patient case together. But the real value is in the data. So how many people have actually participated? Where are the knowledge gaps? And how can we actually see a change in behavior? If you did a patient case in March, for instance, and then you did one in June, is there an actual difference? So can we see that the doctors that we're targeting are actually changing their behavior from that one period of time to the other? That will give you a value, because then we can see, okay, well, they're actually prescribing the right drug more frequently, and that will benefit the patients. So that is one sense of giving value. And then that's one thing, obviously. But then there's the real or the actual data in the dashboard. So this is something where you can compare on a global level, obviously, to see, okay, is this actually giving value? Is there an uptake of more information? Do we get more meetings? How much engagement time are you having with your key target groups? If you know that normally I'm calling 1,000 calls per month and I'm not getting any meetings, and all of a sudden you can see, but digitally we have all of these meetings coming online and we can measure them. How many minutes are we actually getting with each of our contact groups? That is something that's in the dashboard, so you can actually follow that data as well.
Next question is in terms of your entrepreneur journey. How did you identify or form the initially founding team, and how was the composition of the developed team for MedUniverse?
Yes, so excellent question, and it's really this is never a one-man show. Starting a company is all about the team. So defining the right team members is something that you really need to put a lot of emphasis. And I really stress that the people that you find at school are usually a very good sort of starting point, because you know who you've been working with in different projects. And that's exactly what happened to me, because my co-founder in this project is Anna Norin, and we went to school together. We were at Stockholm School of Economics together, and we were both in the party committee. And I knew exactly what she was like. We were good friends back then. And then I recruited her as the CEO of Tasteline. So we worked several years together. And once you know who you've got by your side and who you can trust, it's a really good foundation of actually starting a new company together. So then Anna and I decided to start MedUniverse together. And quite early on in that process, we found another team. We were introduced to another team of two men who had had a similar idea, and the two of us connected. And they had the initial capital that we needed to get the money or the company off the ground. And that's how we got our initial funding and our initial team. And in that process, we had a press release and we had an article published in a paper. And that was read by another school friend of ours, Stina. So she called us and said, do you need a third team member? And she joined us and has now been on the team since the first half years of the start of the company as well. So that was the start, and from then on, we've really tried to build the team within both sales and marketing, obviously, but product and tech, and with good competence within technical skills as well. So building development of the platform and building that in a good way. So having respect for both of those areas has been really important in building this company.
Okay, and next question is, have you seen the tool to be applied in a medical device usage case? For example, is surgery case? Sorry.
So if they've used the MedUniverse platform in a medical device setting, is that what the question is? I think that's how I perceived it.
Yeah, I will say, I will rephrase it again. Have you seen the tool to be applied in a medical device usage case? And for example, in surgery case?
Yeah, so not in surgery, but we have had medtech. So it's more common among drugs and pharma companies, but medtech has and medical device has absolutely the same potential. Learning wise, this is exactly how it should be used. It's still got patients, and I think it could actually be much more hands-on and actually more instructive out of an image perspective. So I would really, I'm really looking forward to have more cases like that. We started out, I mean, as a company and as a founder, you always need to focus on something first. And our first case was actually within pharma, and that's why we started to focus in that area. It was within the neuroendocrine tumors, and that's where we started. And that could obviously be taken into the surgery as well. So it has that capacity. Any patient, I would say. We also have a couple of initiatives that have been directed straight to patients, and obviously then the wording and things need to be a little bit different. It's a little bit different language, but other than that, it's anything with the patient scenario as a common ground, I'd say work really well in this platform.
Okay, and I think we have one question left. Do you collaborate with the other stakeholder beyond pharma, like the public institution or patient organization?
Yeah, so we do. We just did our first collaboration with a patient organization, Heart Lung Foundation, which is really exciting because they're going to use it to inform patients about the most common scenarios that you need to be aware of, sort of like learning information. So we're actively looking for more of those type of collaborations, as well as it gives both good content and also has a real impact on, again, health economics and really getting the patients involved in their own health and informing and how can you work more proactively and prevention in healthcare. So that we're really, really excited about. And any ideas that you might have along those lines are more than welcome. I'd be happy to be in touch with you regarding that if you have any ideas.
Sorry, one more question. The last one.
Yeah, I was expecting that there should be a dialogue. That's really good.
Yeah, is it easy to get funded when the target market are in low or middle income countries?
That's an excellent question. It is. I'd never say it's easy. I mean, you need to have the right idea, but if they can see the value of it and that they can see that they will have better information, most of those countries are involved. We're heavily involved in Eastern Europe right now. We've got 14 countries who are using the platform there. And I'd say that in that region, obviously, they have sometimes limited budgets, and we will make those necessary changes. I mean, it is also the price differentiation is different depending on what country you're representing and also what therapeutic area or drug that you're representing, where you're at in that stage. So the pricing really varies, but especially on market. So I think the importance is to actually make sure that you contribute with value, then they will see that it's worth it. Sometimes we've also had to also show the value before actually they become customers. So we have like trial periods for customers where they can work with us for a month and see, okay, well, this is exactly what we want to do. Okay, let's try this out, and then they can make a more well-informed decision regarding financing as well.
Okay, I think that's it. All questions. Thanks for answering all questions here.
Yes. Okay. Great. Well, I see that we have 4 minutes left. Maybe there's some more questions or comments. I'm happy to also stay in touch with you. I'm leaving my email address here, and feel free to really reach out. And if you do, or connect with me on LinkedIn as well, please just write a short note that you attended this seminar so that I will know where it's coming from. And let me know if you want to stay in touch with any in regards to any of these questions that were raised here or topics that were raised here. Not sure if you have any other comments or questions, but I'm certainly very happy to have participated, and time passes so quickly. It feels like I've been talking so quickly, but really good questions too.
Well, thank you so much, Anna, for being with us. It has been very, very interesting. Yeah, and maybe we'll get more questions once we publish the video on Facebook. And just to a very quick words on our next events as eSport chapter. Sorry, I'm trying to. Oh, yeah, okay. So our next events, we have 2 events in April with other professionals in HER. So a career in global health economics and outcome research and machine learning. And then we have 2 events in May, the consequences of value-based assessment of medical devices and a PhD project. So you're all welcome to follow our Facebook page and to join us for these events. And then a very quick word, we're looking for new team members. So you can find all of this information on Facebook, but again, if you're interested, just like give an eye on that and consider it. So I really want to thank you, Anna, again for being with us, and thank everyone for being for the questions and for joining us today. So have a good afternoon, everyone.